And you might as well give reasons too. Edit. Guys, you blew up my inbox. Rest in peace, me. Story 1. Easy read on self-discovery and being happy with oneself. Chase after your own dreams, not others. This is one of those books I've owned many copies of because I keep passing them along to friends. Edit. Wow, my first award ever. Happy that it was received for recommending Siddhartha to you lovely people. Story 2. Here is a link to the Art of War free English translation. You can read it in about 30 minutes. It is all very straightforward one-liners, basically. If you play games at all, want to compete at anything, or want a good approach, honestly, this book can help many people. I read it a lot. Story 3. The Power of Habit shows the science behind the creation of habits and explains how to consistently create good habits and get rid of bad ones. It's definitely not the self-help philosophy kind of book. It reads more like a scientific article mixed with storytelling, but it's clear that Duhigg wanted to present a scientifically proven method of creating habits. It's a great book and a great read. Story 4. The Great Gatsby, which shows just how deeply unhappy one can be if all you focus on is the superficial. It stuns me when people throw Gatsby-themed parties, as if the book is celebrating the rich and the roaring 20s. I mean, it doesn't end well for him. Story 5. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. We hold on to so much stuff that brings us no joy or value. Let it go and be more tranquil. I teach and get to talk about life to young men. The book has changed my life for the better, and I recommend it to other students and other teachers. Story 6. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's an older book, but I reread it every year. It worked wonders for my life, and I still think everyone should read it. Story 7. All is Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Maria Remarque with Beasts of No Nation by Yusuddin Mayawela. Both explore the idea of war and its consequences, including the effects on both soldiers and civilians during conflict. If anything, watch the movies. Story 8. These are probably the most influential books I've read that I can think of right now. Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda. The autobiography of Yogananda, who is mainly credited with bringing Eastern philosophy and religion to the West. A very good introduction for spiritual pondering and universality of religion in general. The Living Gita by Sri Swami Satchidananda. A masterful translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which is more or less the Hindu Bible. An allegorical story of a young man in the middle of a war. Models by Mark Manson. A great introduction to seduction and human psychology. A good modern interpretation of how to be a model man. Very different from most seduction or dating books. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. A great introduction to philosophy. Applied logic to some of life's biggest questions. Confessions of an Economic Hitman. More of a fun read on United States international diplomacy through financial imperialism. On the Road by Jack Kerouac. Adventure and Beatniks. The Motorcycle Diaries by Che Guevara. Adventure and communist themes. This is a vagabond trip through South America that heavily influenced Che. The Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain. I can't say enough about Twain's humor or wit that still rings true today. Discipline Equals Freedom by Jocko Willink. How to Master Your Day and Establish Habits Through Discipline. The Cruise of the Snark by Jack London. They hand-built a boat and sailed to Hawaii. Really fun adventure, nearly modern. Persuasion and Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. The Psychology of Persuasion and Influence. The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. Classic. My Friend the Mercenary by James Brabazon. A great real story of a journalist who recruits a South African mercenary to get behind lines into Liberia to tell the story of the Civil War to the world. He eventually is recruited by the mercenary to film an attempted coup that gets foiled. Absolutely fascinating page-turner. Walden. A classic for good reason. Stoicism and Simplicity. The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. The acid movement of the 1960s detailing the counterculture revolution. Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. A masterpiece. Dark and hilarious. The Alchemist. A modern-day epic. Short, simple, easy to read, but dense in meaning. An enthralling book you can finish quickly that will stick with you for a very long time. Thinking Fast and Slow, another psychology book, very dense but incredibly insightful on how the human mind functions. The Art of War by Sun Tzu, self-explanatory. Catch-22, a classic for good reason. Dark and hilarious. The whole damned if you do and damned if you don't notion that seems to hit home more and more today than ever. If you have any particular topic, I may have some other recommendations. Story 9. My Husband Swears by the Prophet by Khalil Gibran. He carries a copy with him when we travel, and it guides a lot of how he deals with things. We even quoted it at our wedding. Story 10. I'm not one for self-help books, but a few books that changed my way of thinking. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein. It helped me realize how many things we assume and taught me to question assumptions. The conclusions he champions are over-the-top idealistic, but I still think questioning assumptions is immensely important. Plus, it's just a captivating science fiction novel. Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman by Richard Feynman. Just short anecdotal stories from the life of a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, but it's tales like growing up during the Depression, picking up women at bars, and other random stuff. It helped me realize that the most embarrassing thing is being embarrassed. Just do your thing and own it. And it humanizes people. Here's one of the greatest minds of the last century talking about the foolish things he did in college. Endymion by Dan Simmons. It's not an amazing book, but the Jesus figure in the book attempts to do her Sermon on the Mount as concisely as possible and ends up with just 2 words. Choose again. And then applies it to everything, your relationships, your job, your beliefs, political views, whatever. It's important to periodically pull that out, shake off the dust, then re-examine it and decide to recommit or change course. Sometimes I make a sincere and earnest attempt to talk myself out of a closely held view. It helps clarify my thinking even if I fail. Plus, re-examining your life and making conscious decisions about it is just good. It helps shake out some of that ennui that creeps into every life. Opening Skinner's Box by Lauren Slater is a popular science book about psychological experiments. The author's commentary is sometimes good and sometimes weak, but the experiments themselves are worth a great deal of thought. You can't help but put yourself inside the experiments, and if you're able to be honest about yourself, you'll come to some unhappy conclusions. But simply knowing about such predispositions, I guess, knowing about them means you can change them. Story 11. A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. It's about a man and a childhood acquaintance preparing and then walking the entire length of the Appalachian Trail during a midlife crisis, and how unprepared they are. I hate reading, but I love this book. It's funny but makes you look at yourself. Also, The Hawkline Monster because it's badass. Story 12. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit. The modern translation of Homer's Odyssey. The Art of War. Plato's Socratic Dialogues. Darwin's Origin of the Species. The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Orwell's 1984 and Animal Farm. Asimov's Foundation trilogy and I, Robot short story collection. Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles. Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. And Thoreau's On Walden Pond. Reasons? Well, they have entertained and educated me over the years, and a lot of life lessons can be found. Loyalty, creative thinking, critical thinking, friendship, compassion, and appreciation of the natural world. Story 13. So, literature major here. Here's some I think speak to being male. Moby Dick is my favorite novel. An incredible adventure and one of the most powerful stories of rage and vengeance consuming a man. Lonesome Dove is, at its heart, a tale about the things men will do for love, the pitfalls of hero worship, and the love men have for other men. Nothing sexual, nothing romantic. Male love of each other. The Memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant explores what it takes to win, how you should think of your enemy, and how you should behave in victory. And whiskey. If you want to go to the root of modern masculinity, the Aeneid basically lays out the requirements and ideas that manliness was based on for centuries. The road will make you go hug your kids. Blood Meridian will stay with you forever. The Sun Also Rises explores the madness that consumes a man in love and the sadness of the friend zone, a term for something all young men have experienced. Story 14. So someone mentioned The Art of War, and I'd like to chime in with The Art of Peace by Morihei Ueshiba. It is the concept behind the martial art form Aikido and teaches you how to divert the enemy's aggression away from you without causing you or your enemy any harm, both in a physical and psychological way. Story 15. Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman truly changed how I look at the world and myself. Basically, it is a book on cognitive biases and the extent to which our internal worlds are shaped by these biases on an unconscious level. Story 16. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood is a must-read for anyone in my opinion. There's a show of it on Hulu, I think. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury is another good one if you are into dystopian stuff. My personal favorite book is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. It is one of those stories where you have to go in knowing nothing for the full experience. If you are into stories with lots of symbolism, you will like it. Story 17. The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. It's a thick fantasy novel about broken people doing incredible things, and will almost definitely help you better understand yourself through its vivid world and unique cast of characters. Also, there are anime battles. Story 18. A Brief History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson was a fun, insightful read. Likely not as detailed as Sapiens. I haven't read Sapiens yet. But it's more about the discoveries we've made throughout time. Useful for just remembering that we got to this crazy technological age through countless odd, quirky, brilliant people that history will little remember. And Bill Bryson is hilarious throughout. Story 19. I'd like to recommend a few books that helped inform my view of the world. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood instructed me on the fear many women hold in modern Western society. I remember it feeling like fiction when I first read it, and now it feels all too real and possible. The Sparrow by Maria Doria Russell is one of the most deeply disturbing and sad books I have ever read. It speaks to the hubris of humanity, the dangers of preconceived notions, and our inability to understand the alien. Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco is a dense and sometimes difficult read. It speaks to how we inform our own reality and just how far that can get from the truth. Story 20. Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, written in the 1700s. People during that time thought it was real. It's an amazing story about a man surviving a shipwreck, amongst other adventures. Truly a fascinating tale. I have read this book more than once and always enjoy it. Or A Child of the Yago by Arthur Morrison. A story similar to Oliver Twist but more realistic and much sadder. Story 21. Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. It's a very well-articulated book about big data and bias that focuses on men and the economic and social costs of ignoring women. Anyone interested in data and research should read it, be aware of, and be vigilant about the invisible forces shaping us and our society, and combat it because it affects all of us. It's very research-oriented and overall very articulate. Story 22. Welcome to the bottom of the comments section. Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. Ever wondered why diamonds cost so much? Can a pearl of unknown background cost the same? The book is arguably the beginning of behavioral economics and is about how humans' perception of the monetary value of certain things is flawed and why they make economically irrational decisions. It shows us how easily humans can fall into pitfalls and how easily companies have manipulated us. This is great for people who want to avoid the dangers of consumerism, businessmen who want to find business models that maximize their profit, and authorities to create effective policies. You don't need to build things that perfectly work. You just need to build things that are perfect for humans. Made to Stick by the Heath brothers. An extension of the above. The book is about how to make certain ideas stick to humans. It's great for your self-promotion, great for your writing, and great for your storytelling. Story 23. How to Be a 3% Man by Corey Wayne. Get past the fact that he tells you to search online for stuff instead of just explaining, and it has solid advice that definitely made me more confident in myself. I would also recommend reading more poetry, but that's a bit more subjective. I'm a sucker for love poems, and Pablo Neruda has some of the best. Story 24. What Then Must We Do? By Leo Tolstoy. It's a good perspective providing book on poverty, exploitation, and greed inherent in us, and how to address them. The best part is it is free. Good for people who seem to be lost or directionless in life, generally speaking. Story 25. This is a bit of a weird one, and the explanation is key to why I'm recommending it. Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Ultimately, throughout my life I've grown to hate this book and all it stands for. But I wouldn't be who I am without it. It's a horrible propaganda piece, but it gives you an insight into how disingenuously delivered ideas can be made to seem reasonable regardless of what they are. Engaging with and fighting against what I felt was wrong, but was delivered in a way that couldn't be refuted easily, made me a better thinker, a better reader, and a better writer and speaker. Delivering ideas is hard, and delivering them honestly is even harder. Plus, many people hold to the ideas in this book. Regardless of which side you come out on, it's a good read. Story 26. Not a guy, but definitely Man's Search for Meaning. It's written by a Holocaust survivor and is extremely insightful. It's a book I recommend everyone read at least once. Story 27. Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman by Richard Feynman. An interesting read regarding one of the most intelligent but also personable men of the 20th century. So many small but important lessons on education, politics, and science. Story 28. The Power of Now. This book explains that your whole life is in one moment now. It is never not now. We expend significant amounts of energy worrying about the past or future and not being present. Changed my life.